What an honor it is to be here and share a few moments with you guys. I noticed that it's supposed to be for students and for mid-career professionals and late career professionals, and I hope I give something to everybody. I'm going to start out by saying that I am retired from the university, but I'm not tired. I have a lot of energy left. One time a Swedish colleague of mine asked me, what does this mean, retired? What does it mean, that you're tired once and you get tired one more time? I said, no. So let's have a good few minutes together here and share some ideas. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a trip in time, backwards, to start with some past things, and then I'm going to work us back to now and then into the future. And I'm going to do all this in about 20 minutes. So let's get after it. I start here with, Sean McCann did an excellent job a couple of years ago talking about the history of this talk and his work with the work with Coleman, Griffith, and everything. But I'm going to start here with this man, this great man, Bruce Ogilvie. And for the young people in the audience, and you know that his title is the father of applied sports psychology in North America. But to me, he was a mentor. He was a friend. He was a guy I could call on the telephone, and every time you talked to Bruce, it was amazing that it sounded, when Bruce would speak with you, you thought you were the only person in the world when he was speaking to you. It was just him. This book that he wrote with Tom Tutko, Problem Athletes and How to Handle Them, Bruce was never happy with that title. I don't know how they came up with the title, but it's still a useful book, but he didn't like the word problem athletes. And of course, I don't either. Now, Bruce was a pioneer. And the reason I wanted to talk about this gentleman is because I have coffee with him from time to time, and Coach Matta was he's the only coach ever in the history of the NBA that never played basketball in his entire life. And he started up in Grace, Idaho as a junior high school coach, and then he went to Weber State University, and then they offered him the job at the Chicago Bulls. And he brought Bruce in 1968. He brought Bruce in to do some consulting with the Chicago Bulls. Now imagine that. In 1968, bringing in a person from our field of that stature to consult with the Bulls. So Bruce went in and did some psychometric testing and helped them, and then left. And so Dick was getting ready to take his team up to play a team up in Milwaukee that had a guy named Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So Dick thought he would try something that Bruce taught him, and so he had his team in the locker room before the game, and he was taking them through some visualization stuff, and you're going to be able to dribble down the floor, and the ball's going to feel good in your hands, and it's going to be release, and it's going to feel good when you release it, and this whole thing. And the team hit the door, goes flying out to play the game, and they got beat by 25. So he's walking down. This is Dick's story. That's why I love to talk to coaches, because they tell you the stories. So he's walking down after the talk, and he's upset, and his big 7-foot center, Tom Borwinkle, comes up, and he puts his arm around him. He goes, "What's the matter, Coach?" And Dick goes, "What do you mean, Tom? We just lost by 25. I mean, I'm upset." And he goes, "Oh, Coach," he goes, "just close your eyes and pretend that we won." You know, we have nice journals in the early years, and good research, and part of the history of this organization is that we had to start somewhere, and we started there. And notice that it's 3 A's, not 2. This was the Association for the Advancement of Applied Sports Psychology. And at Jekyll Island, I did my homework. I checked this out a little bit. I was there, first of all, and there's people in the audience that were there as well. And we had about 100 to 150 people in attendance, and we had 45 sessions, and that included posters. Everybody was in the same room for the whole conference. It was incredible. And that's how we started. And those three categories are the categories that were there. Now, I got influenced rather quickly by this first issue of the Sports Psychologist. And I don't know if you can read those references in there, but I'll read them for you. The one it was by Bob Nideffer, and Bob Nideffer wrote a nice article about psychological testing, the use of psychometrics in our profession. Now, this is 1987, and this got my attention that perhaps there was some utility in being able to use the inventories that were available at that time to provide a valuable insight to an athlete in a rather rapid way, because athletes they have a sense of urgency about what to get going and to learn about themselves so that they can get better. And they don't mind hearing, they don't want you to tell them everything that they're doing well. They'd also like to tell you the things that they need to work on in order to get better. The second one was by Terry Orlick and John Partington, which was telling about what the critical components were from the athletes and the coaches, that who were the effective people in the Olympic Games at that time. And the last one by Rainer Martens was the one that really got my attention, because Rainer Martens, who was basically involved with nomothetic research up to that point in his life, actually came out and said that there's some utility in using ideographic research, asking the athlete at a case study level, and made a strong case for looking at the individual within the group. And that got me thinking, yeah, I think that's really where something could really be gained. Now, about this time, we had the USOC Sports Psychology Registry, and Shane Murphy was our first official USOC sports psychologist, and they had a registry, and those are the three classifications: education, research, and clinical. And there were about 20 to 25 of us on that original group. That actually worked out fairly well at the time. It was an interesting way so if you were coming from an educational background, this is what you did. If you were coming from a clinical background, and then there were researchers on there that didn't work with athletes, that were trying to give us the best science that they could give us to help us work with the athletes and coaches. Then later in our profession, we had these journals, and I'm very, very happy to see now that we're also starting a journal for students. I think this is a great idea, and I'm really glad to see that's happening too. I'm going to talk about sport exclusively today, because I have a love affair with sport. But later on, I'm going to talk about other applications in our field. Now, this is where I'm going to start, where I started to get into the Olympic movement and the work with athletes. And I'm not going to talk a lot about my professional athlete consultations, but I want to talk about the Olympians, because I have a special place in my heart for Olympic athletes. Most of them don't have two nickels to rub together, and they're in the pursuit of excellence for a long, long period of time. And so these young people, this was the first Olympic Games that I attended, and at that time, we weren't really getting the access to the athletes that we needed to at the time. But it was the first time that we were able, at least from the United States, to have a full-time credentialed person with what's called an AO credential in the village, and that was Shane Murphy. What's interesting is, though, that his headquarters was in the NBC headquarters inside the village. but he was able to navigate that very, very well, even though being in a pretty high-profile area where all the TV places were. This was the last Olympic Games that I attended, with some in between. And you know what's interesting, each Olympic Games has its own unique flavor to it. That's the other thing. I've been to summer games, I've been to winter games, and each one has its own experience. And this right here, when you see this, if that doesn't make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, something's wrong. The guy that's carrying that flag happened to be on the Nordic combined team. His name's Todd Lodwick, and he's elected by the athletes. The athletes elect who carries the flag, in the USA flag. That was his 6th Olympic Games. Think about that for a minute. How much of his life he put in to be in 6 Olympic Games. It's incredible when you really think about it. This slide I put in because it's one of my favorite slides ever. And it's about the coach-athlete relationship. We as consultants are invited in to their world. And it's a very important point. I've heard it here several times, but I think it's so important I want to make it again, that we need to be respectful of the coach-athlete relationship and the role that we take as consultants in that. Now, I mentioned Kareem earlier. Of course, the picture on the left is Kareem when he played for Coach Wooden at UCLA. But what really drives me with this one is the relationship. Later in the life, Coach Wooden lived to be 100 years old. And look at the respect of Kareem helping his coach helped him, and then look at him helping his coach in the later years of his life. And that quote there is one of the greatest quotes, and I've used it many, many, many times. It's what you learn after you know it all that counts. The people that scare me the most in any profession, in anything, not our profession only, but are the people that don't know what they don't know. And what this really tells me is that we, as professionals, need to continue to learn for our whole life. We need to continue to be curious. We need to continue to learn we can learn something from everybody every day. And when we're in the locker room, we need to pay attention that we're not coming in as, quote, the expert all the time. We're coming in as an advocate. We're coming in as someone who is joining the team in the pursuit of excellence. And we hope to be able to provide something, but I always want people to remember that we're also going to learn something to get better at what we do. Now, what's happened since we met last year in Toronto? A lot. In this APA monitor, we're one of the 10 trends to watch. That was in the monitor in January, or in the November issue. We were in this issue, and by the way, I'm only giving you a few of these things. I'm not hitting everyone, but we were in the Sports Illustrated, so we're in the trade journals about the importance of what we do with athletes and coaches. This vote was very important, and that occurred in January. That in a vote of 80-0, the Power 5 conferences and all those representatives at NCAA said it is very important, it's not a luxury to provide mental health services, or at least have availability to student athletes in their universities. And I think this is probably going to filter down into what we call the mid-majors, NAIA, Division II, Division III. That's my hope, that it will filter down. And by the way, this took effect August 1st. So it's just happened that now this is very important, and it's moving forward. We've had more media exposure. You notice you recognize our colleague Bill Parham and the work that he's been doing in the NBA. And most recently, as of just a few days ago, the NBA also has, Adam Silver has now mandated that all the teams shall have access to mental health. And many, many people, and some people in this room were instrumental in getting this passed through. So it's another entry point for our ability to come in and deliver service in a great way. The other article was about Gershon Tenenbaum and what he's doing and what he has been doing at Florida State. So we're getting a lot of press this way. Now, this slide, I think, is a very important slide for me. I hope it is for you. The guy on my left, I don't know what side he is on yours, but I'm looking at that screen and he's on the left, is Kevin Love. Many of you recognize Kevin Love. And he took a very courageous stand in coming out and saying he had anxiety problems. But he didn't just stop at that. You know his story, but it opened up people's eyes in a good way to try to destigmatize what we do, because we're constantly fighting to destigmatize what we do and make it more of part of the training. Part of what makes us great at what we do is to recognize what we need to work on. And then Kevin went on to be able to give back by making the app Headspace available to all the athletes that wanted it at UCLA. So, you know, I mean, it's not just talking about it, me, it's about give, and about important things. Now, the next guy with the cap on is named Bryson DeChambeau. He's one of the top touring professionals I've been out on the PGA Tour for many, many years. I'm still out there. And he's kind of an interesting individual. All of his clubs, the lengths of his clubs are all the same length. He's like a biomechanics geek. You know, he studies golf in all aspects of it. But why'd I have him here? See the thing in his ear? I don't know if you can see it. That's an EEG biofeedback technique. And what he does is he trains this, and it's kind of unique. I'd never heard of it before. It's called NeuroPeak. And what he does is he can watch movies in his room at night, and he tries to watch movies that scare him a little bit. And if his beta to theta area gets out of whack, you know, goes either high or too low, it shuts the movie off. Well, that's kind of frustrating. You're trying to watch a movie. So you got to get your brain waves back in so you can see the rest of the movie. So he's training it off the court, or off the course. But also, he's able to go on the course and practice out of the bunker with a telemetric sort of device, giving him feedback while he's actually hitting golf shots. Because that's where you need to do it, not in your room watching movies at night out on the golf course where you're trying to play for $6 million a week. So it's got to be in the field as well, being able to apply things. The guy on the bottom, Clay Thompson, you might recognize him, and he came out and talked about how he uses mindfulness in his pre-game routine. And every time a high-profile athlete, as far as I'm concerned, comes out and says that we can use what we teach in this room in various ways, it's going to help us. Because they're the ones that are doing it. And when they come out and talk about it, people get really interested, don't they? Okay, I was supposed to talk about the future. I know a heck of a lot more about the past than I do the future. But I'll give it a shot, all right? Because these guys insisted I talk about the future. So here we go. We have a lot of resources available to us. These are just some that, there are many. But I wish that I would have had some of these available to me when I was coming up. Early professionals, you've got them. Use them. Develop your own style. Don't rely just on these, but look at what others have done and then do it your way. But it's there available to you. Employment opportunities. Now listen, guys, this isn't an exclusive list, but look at all the employment opportunities. I told you I have a love affair with sport, but look at these other areas. Look at where you might also be able to make an impact. I won't go through every one of these because you guys are actually, some of you are practicing in these areas already. An example would be, the other day, my good friend John Heil, who's been working in the high-risk area for the last 15 years, invited me to go out with him to the Portland Police Training Center and watch him work with the police out there. And I was able to get a new perspective on that particular area. I have never worked in this area, but when I actually saw John working, it made me more convinced that we might be limiting ourselves at times to where we think what we do can be valuable. So let's be a little bit more open to maybe some other areas where we can make an impact. Okay, here we go, future. Certification advances, 1992 to the present. You notice that I am CMPC emeritus. My number was 23. That's a pretty good number. Who else had that number? I'm not that good. Yeah, Michael. Yeah. But, you know, we're making advances in this area. There's no question about it. But we will continue to do so. We have to continue to do so in order to get better at what we do. The proficiency in APA and Division 47, I'm sure there's going to be some more things going on in this area as well. Examination of professional training towards a science practitioner model. We do need to rely on great science, but we then have to use it. And that, to me, is the greatest model in the world. There's a lot of great scientists sitting in this audience who have paid their dues to help us to put science to practice, and continue to do so. Sport-specific stuff and training, I think the research is getting better. I remember in the early years we didn't have a lot of sport-specific type of research going on, and now I see more and more great research coming out that's specific to our areas that we work in. I think career changes are going to be occurring. I get excited when I see so many people here who are exploring careers and who are willing to maybe adapt and change and decide to get into something else and rejuvenate themselves in their lives, and I think this is a wonderful thing as well. I took the webinar on private practice that AASP offered, and I was blown away with what people today can do with private practice and the media, you know, all the things that are available to you. I can hardly operate a cell phone, but I mean, I was just absolutely blown away listening to what people can do in this area. I remember when I got my first cell phone, one of the professional golfers said, I need to be able to get a hold of you. I said, well, you can get a hold of me. I have a telephone number and I got an answering machine. And he said, no, I want to be able to get a hold of you. This is when these cell phones looked like walkie-talkies, you know. And I said, I'm not getting one of those. But I did finally get a cell phone, instant access, right? I want to call you now. Preparation of new CMPCs. Yeah, let's keep working on it. I just saw a recent article in our journal that talked about gatekeepers. It was Chris Harwood and his colleagues, and I'd never seen such a thing where there are certain skills that we need to teach young people that are coming into the profession in how to be in a high-stress interview process where you've got a very short window in time to convince the gatekeepers to hire you. And I think this is a skill that maybe some of the graduate programs are teaching now, but it's a very essential skill to get into to the gate, get past the gatekeepers and get an opportunity to work. When I first started working, I didn't even know where the gate was. You know, I mean, it's a whole new world. You were on your own out there trying to figure this whole thing out. Use of social media apps, no question. Everybody's using them. If I was starting out again in my career at this time, I'd get a lot better at this type of stuff. I think we're going to get more and more potential clients coming to us, maybe some that will even surprise us, that we don't know, that we didn't know that we might have an impact in this area. Definitely we're going to get increased media coverage. Let's make it positive. Every time that we do something in the media, we represent us all. Everything that we do, we represent us all. And when I say it's all, we're in this together. We're in this to promote our profession in the greatest possible way. So let's do a good job with that. And finally, continued professionalism in the field. We are developing into a profession. You know, if you think about it, we've only been a profession for a short amount of time when you look at other professions. We're still in the evolution stages. But to me, that's a tremendous opportunity, because as you're evolving, opportunities are constantly available to you to get better at our craft and what we do. Well, I'm looking at the clock, and I made it. I got 1 minute and 21 seconds left. But you know what? I'll use it. I'll wind up with you with 1 minute and 22 seconds, and that is, you notice the title of my talk. Enjoying the ride from Jekyll Island to Portland and beyond. What I would say to you, this is a passion, what we do. It's not a hobby. It's something where we're affecting people in a very, very deep way. Let's continue to do it at the highest level that we possibly can. If we teach them to pursue excellence, we need to pursue it ourselves. Thank you very much.